Well, good afternoon, good evening. This is Gary Borgendale with First Tuesday Conservatives in Alpha News, Minnesota. And again, we always bring together various guests that really talk about the issues, mostly from a conservative standpoint, but we really want to help understand the issues. I'm Gary Borgendale, your host for this evening, also with Salem Media Group, AM 980 The Mission and AM 1280 The Patriot. So you can get more of the conservative and Christian news from there. But this evening joining us is Kendall Qualls. And Kendall has a great story about where he came from and to where he is today. And part of that we'll be talking about Take Charge, an organization that he is leading. And so it's great to have Kendall with us tonight. Welcome, Kendall. Good to have you with us on First Tuesday Conservatives and Alpha News. Well, good. Kendall, can you hear me
Gary,
okay?
thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Oh, good. We had a little distortion there.
Yes, I can hear you fine. How about now?
Okay, that's good. Okay. So Kendall is some of people might recognize Kendall from his running for the 3rd Congressional District here in the state of Minnesota. But he's got a great history, and he's really taken some positions or taken some issues and how to go about solve them. So Kendall, let's just take a little bit about Take Charge right now so we get people's appetite a little bit for that, and then we'll go back from that. But what is Take Charge in one or two sentences we open this up tonight?
Sure. The narrative is quite simple, Gary. Take charge is the emphasis, taking charge of your family, taking charge of your life, taking charge of your community without having to ask any permission or validation from a government or any politician. It is a basic American principle that we do best when we take responsibility for ourselves. And if we need to enlist help, we have those friends, families, and community around us.
That's be a basic of called self-government, I would believe.
Oh, there you go. Exactly right.
Kendall, you've got a very interesting background. And so I'd like you to take a few minutes now and share a little bit of your own background, obviously from an African-American. But share your background and your story, because I think it really gives us a lot better understanding of where you are today and what brought you to that. So go ahead, Kendall.
Yeah, Gary, it's the classic American story. I tell people all the time, I'm no one exceptional. I live in an exceptional country. I serve an exceptional God. And that, trust me, if I can do this, anyone can. I have an average IQ on my best days. And I just follow a simple formula. To give you an idea, my parents unfortunately divorced in the late 1960s. My father came back from Vietnam in 1968. We moved from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne, to Harlem, New York, the worst city at the time for drugs, gangs, violence, and the epicenter for that. And my mom took her kids, all 5 of us, to live with our grandparents. And before we even get to the front door of our grandparents' house, we were held up in broad daylight. So that was my first introduction to New York City. God bless her. My mom couldn't raise all 5 of us by herself. My older brothers and sisters were getting absorbed into the street culture. And so my father, about 3 years later, 3-4 years later, came and got me and my younger brother to live with him in Oklahoma. He was still a drill sergeant in the Army. He was paying alimony and child support. And so what we lived in was a trailer, in a small trailer park. So I shared with people that I got my start in life, starting in the ghetto of Harlem in a trailer park in Oklahoma. And I've been called trailer trash, ghetto kid, and a lot worse in this country. But again, what I share with people is, look, where you start in life is not where you have to stay in life. And I worked full time to get an education in college, and that was my pathway out.
And then also you were in the service as well, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. I joined the Army Reserves when I was 17 years old. And by 19 years old, because I was in ROTC in college, I was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant. And then I went on active duty. I served 5 years as a field artillery officer, stateside, as well as in South Korea, right on the DMZ. And I've made a transition to the corporate world, and I've been in healthcare for nearly 30 years. Half of that on the pharmaceutical sector, the other half in med device, with some great companies like Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic. And here's a kid coming from Harlem, and I have responsibilities for billion-dollar brands, $95 million budget. In fact, wow. Gary, what I share with people is when I was in New Jersey, I was an hour away from where I was held up as a kid when we first got to New York City. 30 years previously, I was 37 years old. I had a $95 million budget, billion-dollar brand. I said, this only can happen in the United States. And I share that, yeah, and I share that not to boast about my career success. This is one of the reasons I decided to get in the office, because the people that helped me along the way were white and black, rich and poor, male and female. Americans help each other when they see someone trying to better their lot in life. They don't put a filter on it. And so when I started hearing the narrative of white privilege and systemic racism, I felt, I have an obligation to stand up and basically counteract and confront that narrative, which is false, completely false. And Americans are not that way. And we should not define the country based on a minority of people and their bad behavior.
So Kendall, I want to go back and circle just a bit with your own career. You must have some the parameters that you live by just for you to be able to be successful in your career that you were, to take you from Harlem to having that billion-dollar brand. What did you have as those characteristics, if you will, that were key for you in moving up in your career and your success?
Yeah, here's one of the things. So I actually went back to school and I got a couple of graduate degrees. And I learned later, probably about 3 to 5 years later, that, I didn't need those graduate degrees to be successful in this country because I already had a PhD. I was poor, hungry, and determined.
That's good. That's good.
So and look, I'm not disparaging education. What I'm saying is, 75% of your success in life is that fire in the belly that you have to do something better and for yourself. And we all need education. That 25% is either trade school certification, or if you pursue college, it's a college education. Right. But you got to have that fire in the belly.
Right. So you ran for U.S. Congress and you weren't successful with that, but you must have learned an awful lot from that. Just tell me a little, and our listeners, Kendall Qualls, what you learned about running for U.S. Congress.
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. It was the most honorable opportunity that I've had to serve our country, other than serving in the military.
Well, thank you.
Here's what I learned. Thank you. Here's what I learned along the way. It was fascinating to me and very humbling, I can tell you. Every week, maybe even twice, 2 or 3 times a week, people would come to me from ages 18 to 80, said, look, I've never been involved in politics. I've never written a check to a politician or a candidate running, but they're writing a check to me. Or if they said, look, this is the first time I've ever had anybody's political sign in my yard, but they did it for me because what they loved about the narrative, my campaign message wasn't just Republican, Democrat, it was American message. And it was that this country is still a bastion of hope and opportunity for anyone, regardless of race, regardless of station in life. You can do amazing things here. And I would not succumb to the messages of the left. It's very simple. Do we have racist people in this country? Yes, we do. Is the country systemically racist? Absolutely not. So there's a distinct nuance, but a very important distinction. So that was something I learned that the people gravitated to my message. So much so, they said, Kendall, your message really can't go away. We really need it in this environment that we're in. Would you consider taking that message on the road? And we did this with Take Charge.
Well, good. This is Gary Borgendale, your host this afternoon and evening for First Tuesday Conservative and Alpha News MN. And we're having a conversation with Kendall Qualls. Kendall, let's talk a little bit about then, so to take this message on the road with Take Charge, let's go a little deeper into Take Charge. And what do you hope to what do you hope to accomplish with Take Charge? And by the way,
Absolutely.
where can people get information, website, or where they can get more information about Take Charge?
Sure. It's takechargemn.com, takechargemikenovember.com, where they can find information
That's
about
a
it.
military conversation coming out in there.
Yeah.
MN, okay.
Just make it easy. Yep.
Yep.
So,
Go ahead, Kendall.
here's the narrative. It is quite simple. I used to say, if you know what the name of the Super Bowl trophy is, you know why they call it the Lombardi Trophy. And there's a story about Vince Lombardi when he first goes into Green Bay. He holds up a football and he says to his brand new team, "This is a football." It's about getting back to the basics of the game. And that's primarily what Take Charge is about. It is reminding the Black community that we didn't used to live like this. We did not used to live like this, even in my lifetime. And it's about getting back to the basics of faith, family, and education. Faith, family, and education. In the worst of times for the Black community, from the 20s to the 30s, Jim Crow South, my father lived in the Jim Crow South. My father-in-law lived through the Jim Crow South. We were nearly 80% two-parent families. We didn't have a lot, but we had faith, family, and this pursuit for education. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the civil rights era, during the LBJ administration, the Black community came in. We had these people coming in with help from the government. That was the catalyst that changed where we are today.
The Great Society program.
Right. And so we're not about pointing fingers or who's to blame or why they didn't do something sooner, but we've been on this road for 50 years, 10 years longer than the Israelites wandering in the desert. And so we're going to get this right, and we're going to get this fixed. And we're going to do this by returning back to faith, family, and education, with marriage being the standard for relationships between men and women. And I'm going to do it, Gary. I'll end it with this. We're going to do it with the most effective fighting force known to mankind, and that's moms.
And grandmoms.
We're using mothers from the Black community to communicate this message in our own communities, because they remember there's a group of women that are just hungry for us returning back to where we used to be as far as a God-centered culture and not a government and self-centered culture.
Kendall, I'm going to jump in here a little bit, and you talk quite a bit about faith in here. And I want to, this is Holy Week, and I know that you've shared about your own faith with me a little bit. Share with folks about your faith and how do you incorporated that so deeply into your life? Maybe your testimony, if you want to share it from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll keep it brief, but it's very simple. It's funny. I grew up going to church with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I wanted to spend more time with her. And, it was great spending time with her, but I really didn't see any relevance or hear anything that was relevant in my life. And so as I grew up and started my own adult life, the one thing I didn't want or didn't believe I needed was church. So I was just got out of the military. My first job was in Dallas, Texas. Sheila, my wife, was finishing up her graduate degree, and she couldn't come down for that weekend to visit with me because there was an ice storm. So a family friend invited me to church. I wouldn't have went, but it was a family friend. I did it out of politeness. And I went to church. It was the first time I've ever heard the Bible taught that way before. And it was Pastor Tony Evans was the pastor.
Good pastor.
He was the first Black pastor to get a PhD from Dallas Theological Seminary. And it really literally changed my life. I mean, I've some new insights. I really got grounded in my faith, got reoriented. A year later, when I was 28 years old, I got baptized into the faith as a Christian. Yeah. And along our journey, my corporate journey, we moved quite a bit in my career for different opportunities. And I've had Max Lucado as a pastor, Joe Stoll, who used to be the president of Moody Bible College. We've had some great discipleship. And so we just incorporated those learnings into our personal lives and live our lives according to our faith.
Well, Kendall, that's great to hear. I'm a follower of Christ as well. And I hear a lot of that when comes out in Take Charge Minnesota in there. If memory serves me correct, and one of the issues that is in the Black community, I believe in Ramsey and Hennepin County, 80% of the children born to Black women are in single household families. Am I correct on those statistics, Kendall?
Yeah, you're right. And in some places in North Minneapolis, it's closer to 90%. Here's our message. It's very simple. You might think, well, who is this guy from outside our community saying this? First of all, I grew up in a community just like this. I've had 3 of my siblings, unfortunately, went the wrong way, got incarcerated. So I know the stories. I know the life. I have nieces and nephews. None of my nieces and nephews on my side knows what it's like to live with a mother and father in the home. And so
say that again.
For me,
say that again.
I have 25 or so nieces and nephews. None of them knows what it's like to grow up with a mom and dad in the home. None of them. Only my children do, obviously, but you know what? I'm convinced that, look, God did not give me this opportunity and this type of life so I can live comfortably in the suburbs and just retire and go down to Arizona. Although some winters might be nice, but I want to,
not yet.
It is really for me to spread this message and give people a sense of hope that you can turn your life around. And not only have I done it, I've helped kids do it along my adult life. I've been mentors. But what resonates, number one, I just say this. You know what? God did not intend for women to raise kids alone. You know how it is, Gary. It's hard enough with 2, parents.
Correct.
I feel like I could have used some extra help. Right. And so it starts there. God did not intend for women to raise kids alone, and then when the kids are gone, to be alone. And so our culture is broken, and by the grace of God, I've got 11 women now, 11 moms. We haven't broken into 2 different cohorts, and they're now beginning to get the training to go into the community to share the message of returning to faith, family, and education, with marriage being the standard. And I'm now recruiting the first cohort of married men. We're selecting married men from the community to set the standard. So by the end of this year, Gary, my target is to get nearly 100 women, 100 mothers in the community marching to this song of faith, family, and education, and retraining our community and getting them back to the basics.
So what type of training will you be doing then, Kendall, with this Take Charge Minnesota?
Well, it's interesting. This is what I said. In fact, what the Republican Party needs a little help with. We need to connect with people, both head and heart.
Correct.
We only connect with them directly with intellectual information and not connecting with them emotionally. And so here's what I'm doing. I'm reminding the Black community, we're training them in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and 50s. We have facts, we have data that shows that the Black community during the worst of times were intact, functional, and thriving in their own Black community. When the war on poverty came, you see a spike. In fact, we had a warning. We had a warning signal from Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He says, look, in 1965, if this unwed births continue, it's at 24%, these people will be cut off from the American dream. He was ridiculed and mocked, and he sat down in his corner and be quiet until he ran for U.S. Senator from New York. But I show an inflection point. So we look at that macro data. Then I show exactly what happened right after that in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And I'll just share one statistic. It's sad, absolutely. So the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, publishes the health of Americans every year by demographic. The number one cause of death for infants from ages from 1 to 19 is typically cancer, birth defects, some other type of childhood disease. But within the Black communities for males, it's homicide from ages 1 to 19.
Well,
that's a byproduct of these communities, fatherless home communities.
It's one of the things that I've said too. Until it's safe in the Black woman's womb, it won't be safe in the Black community streets because life is not valued. And until life is valued, then what difference does it make if you take somebody's life if there's no value to that?
Well, the safest place, and again, we share this one other statistic and real quick, and the Justice Department publishes this data the safest relationship for a woman, especially in Black women, but women in general, are in married relationships. And as they have data that shows where they get calls on, where they prosecute, where it's safest environments, married women or widowed from obviously a long marriage.
Right. Right. So Kendall, let's go back then and saying, so how can people, what do you want people to do? And then how can they get engaged with you to carry this message that you're teaching others out there?
Sure. So the message is twofold. Number one, we're pushing back against the critical race theory. It's a falsehood. It's
good. Explain that. I want you to unpack that and really go into that critical race theory, Kendall.
Yeah. So critical race theory, they base everything on, look at the racial disparities between income, education. And for years, I've been saying this, they're looking at the wrong data. And now I understand they don't care to look at the right data. They want their political agenda. When you peel back the onion from that data and you look at children from two-parent Black families versus children from fatherless homes, what you find is those children and those families, their income levels are just similar to the general population. Their children have low incidence with run-in with law enforcement. Their kids graduate high school at the normal distribution curve of the general population. The issue that we have a two-parent privilege, not a white privilege issue. It's the idea of the nuclear family works. Unfortunately, the progressives on the left do not want to promote that agenda of a nuclear family with a male head of household or male, female,
and married,
co-leading their families,
and
married, exactly. And so we're pushing back against that. It's number one, is not biblical from a Christian standpoint. We disrupt that natural. Every civilization around the world that's the nuclear building block for any civilization, and unfortunately, we don't promote it. So we have data that shows that specifically economically, as well as safety, that the nuclear family is the safest place for women as well as children.
So so how can people get involved in what you're doing, Kendall? Or what do you want people to come?
Well, there's two things.
Do with you.
So number one, I've spoken across the region here at different clubs, Rotary clubs, men's group, Bible groups, other groups. I'm getting ready to speak at a MOPS group. And in fact, my wife and I want to do that one together. And this is how to fight against critical race theory.
Kendall, with this group, so what is the MOPS group? We need to explain what the MOPS group is. So.
Okay, I thought this group might know it, but yeah, there's mothers of preschoolers.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, mothers of preschoolers. And so we're on the road. We're speaking, whether it's suburban areas, small town Minnesota, or even in the Twin Cities. So how can we help? Number one, if you want me to speak, happy to speak on either issue. What do we do in the Black community, as well as what do we do with critical race theory? Obviously, donations to the organization helps. If you see our latest video,
you're a nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit. Yeah, we're a nonprofit. And if you've seen our latest video we have on our website, you see the quality of the content we're getting out there. And we have women from the communities, Black women from the community, that are saying this is not a systemically racist country. So we never get the microphone of the people that love this country. They want to have better community. It always goes to the loudest voices and the hotheads. We're giving this community a voice. Kendall,
where can they find that video?
They can find it at the website at takechargemn.com. That's MikeNovember.com.
And by the way, I've seen that several times. There's very, very successful people, Black women, families and their younger families. So I really encourage you to take a good look at that. And Kendall, you have also then called for a day of prayer and fasting as part of that video. Explain a little bit more about that day of prayer and fasting that you've called for.
Sure. You know, it's interesting. So throughout the Bible, and you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know this, you know, God has said, he's not saying when you walk away. He says, not say if you walk away. He says, when you drift away,
Right.
basically, when you turn your hearts back to me and humble yourself, I'll embrace you. I'll restore your people and I'll restore your land. And that's what we're doing. What we're saying is, look, we've tried everything in the Black community. We tried ourselves. We asked politicians. We voted for everyone that we can think of to help us out. Well, I guess that we're at the end of the rope. I guess we ought to ask God for help. So that's what we're doing. So that, especially on right before Easter, on this Holy Week, what we're saying is, God, we've come to our last rope. We acknowledge that we went astray in the way we've been living our lives as a people, and we're turning our hearts back to you. And we want you to embrace us. And our prayers are that this is beginning of the restoration of the American Black family. And
Kendall, that I've also joined along with you in that prayer for a day of prayer and fasting on kind of a smaller topic, but kind of fits in with Minneapolis very well, with the case of Derek Chauvin and his trial going on. We're a Kairos moment in the world right now, how the Lord or the world is looking at this trial. So in addition to praying for Take Charge Minnesota, we're encouraging people to pray for forgiveness and repentance relative to the Derek Chauvin trial as well. So it's just a great thing that we're take that time for prayer and fasting to really seek into the Lord from these different issues that way. So thank you for your initiative of leading that, Kendall. Appreciate that. So I want to go back a little bit, that you ran for Republican U.S. Congress, but you want to really emphasize that this is broader than Republican. This is not political. So speak to that a little bit more, Kendall.
Here's the scenario, Gary. I mean, listen, my parents are lifelong Democrats. And I knew Democrats that served in the military. I mean, you think about, there's no one iconic than John Glenn, U.S. Senator from Ohio, astronaut, U.S. Marine aviator in Vietnam, a Democrat, love this country. And so what I want to get back to is a sense that, it should be country first.
Amen.
Politics second, right? And then if you're a Christian, obviously it's faith first. It's your faith first. But what I want to make sure that we do, and I think we've kind of gone off the ropes a lot, is the basis of who we are as Americans. First of all, our founding fathers said, we can't be a self-governed country if we're not a literate people. We have to be literate, and also knowing our history and all that as well. And we can't be a self-governing country if you're not a virtuous people. We shouldn't need all of these other, restrictions to guide us to do the right thing. And I think we've been way off the mark on that. And that's what this movement's all about, is getting us back to knowing our history and getting us back to the virtues that who we are as a people. It is not in what politician you trust. It's in God we trust.
Amen. And that's kind of like about revival and transformation of our city and our state. Minnesota has been the home of many, many revivals from 1860 to 1960. And I just look at those wells of those revivals, and that would come back. And Kendall, you're really, really at the front end of that, because you're just a practical approach from anybody. It's get an education, get a job, get married, have sex, have kids. And if you do it in that order, a lot of those problems go away. And it's a bold challenge even in the pastorates in the churches to be able to speak that way and confidently speak that way. Kendall, it's just kind of
and that's the sad part about it, that they're able to speak that way publicly.
Right. Now, with the cancel culture that is out there, have you been canceled, or have you been criticized for what you've been saying? Have you gotten pushback from others out there to your message?
Yeah, you know what? There is this narrative that I'm not addressing the systemic racism part.
Okay.
And I'm not concerned about the criticism, because here's my number one issue, Gary, especially in the Black community. In my lifetime, we went from 80% two-parent families to 80% fatherless homes, without a whisper of anyone saying we need to turn this around. And so they can criticize me all day long, because here's the scenario. I really call this a really American Holocaust. I mean, we're literally, the Black American family is near extinction. And they can criticize me all day long. I'm going to bring up those statistics, and I'm going to say, if you want to tackle that issue with me, I'll have that conversation all day long. Because basically what you're saying is Black women should raise their kids alone, and I'm on the wrong track.
Right. And plus, if you look at, was it probably about now 10 years ago that the Latino population surpassed the African-American population as the largest minority in the United States. And part of that is exactly what you're talking about, because if you are not having these families of married couples having more than one child, that's what's going to happen. And if you don't get married at all, there it is. It's going to be even worse that way. So Kendall, I just wanted to probably, anything else we want to share? Where can they, again, tell us your website and what you would like people to do to take this message further from where it is today?
Sure. So first of all, Gary, you know what, I for a long time, I think on our side of the aisle, and our side of philosophy, if you will, thinking about who we are as Americans, we play a lot of defense. In fact, we've been playing, we play 80% defense, and we play it badly. And we play 20% offense, and we do that even worse. So again, my website is takechargemn.com. Yes. And so what we're doing, we're going on offense, on a two-front offense. Number one, we're knocking down critical race theory based on the fallacy of what it is false numbers. I want people to have confidence that, look, don't worry about being called a racist. They're going to call you racist even if you remain quiet anyway. So fight back for the salvation of your family, your kids. You're not racist. Your kids are not racist. We need Americans. I tell people all the time, remember the last line of the Star-Spangled Banner, and we need to start acting like it. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Okay, say it again.
That's the last line of Star-Spangled Banner. Really, you know, it's the land of the free and home of the brave. But we got to start acting like we're brave.
And we're free to be free.
That's exactly right.
Very good. I will wind this up. So this has been a great conversation with Kendall Qualls, and he has really put an organization together called Take Charge, and you can get more information at takechargemn.org. And this is Gary Borgendale for First Tuesday Conservatives and Alpha News. And I want to wish everybody out there a very happy Easter, and take that opportunity, what Kendall said, when somebody invited them to church, made a difference in their life. If that's who you are, take this opportunity to invite your friends and neighbors to Easter service this weekend and change your life as well. So God bless you. Thank you very much, Kendall.
Thank you. Goodbye. Happy Easter.
Very good. Thank you again, and stay tuned to more from First Tuesday Conservative and Alpha News MN as we bring out more conversations of topics. Have a good night and happy Easter to you all.